And away we go.
Hi and welcome to the Reading Roads podcast, and it's another What We've Been Watching episode this week, as I'm going to be reviewing Theatre Camp, Past Lives, and in TV we're going to be talking Wheel of Time Season 2, Fisk, and we'll be hearing Jose's thoughts on Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4, and we finally got him to watch Strange New Worlds as well. So first up, we're going to talk Theatre Camp, and it was written by Noah Galvin, Molly Gordon, Nick Lieberman, and Ben Platt, Mr. Evan Hansen himself. I basically know that this guy, he was in the stage play of Evan Hansen, and everyone loved it, and then he did the film and everyone hated it. David, when we last mentioned it, was like spectacularly, he was just not happy about it.
I think one of the critiques I heard was that by the time the film came around, he was just too old to play a teenager. Funny little critique, but I'll take it.
I mean, he's got to be in his mid-30s though now, right? Surely. So yeah, I think.
Oh, I gotta admit, he didn't look 30s. I would have given him 20s. So
Jose, you can Google that information while I continue. And so it's actually co-directed by Lieberman and Molly Gordon, who also stars in the film as camp counselor Rebecca Diane. Now, I didn't realise until after I'd seen it that Molly Gordon is Claire from The Bear. And another link to The Bear, Ao Adeberry, Sydney from The Bear, she's also in this, playing a clueless camp counsellor. Now, see, I had a picture in my head of this film, what it was kind of going to be like Amy Poehler and Bradley Cooper's characters from Wet Hot American Summer, because they have that kind of little side storyline about, you know, the over-the-top counsellors who are in love with each other, except the guy's gay, and like the girl's completely clueless and doesn't realise it, and they're just determined to put on a play. And it really is that, but just fleshed out much more into a single, simple film idea. Now, the setup is that as summer rolls around, kids from all over are ready to spend the summer at, I don't even know how you pronounce this, and it's in English, Adrenoid Axe, a low-budget theatre camp in upstate New York. But while recruiting for the summer program, its founder, Joan, falls into a coma, leaving her clueless crypto pro son, Troy, who has no idea how to make money, let alone run a camp. Oh. And then Troy and the counsellors have to work together to save the camp and, of course, put on the show. Now, I'm not what you call a theatre geek. Like, I'm not a fan of musicals, really, despite I actually played Potiphar in our school's production of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And what was hilarious at the time is the rest of our band that we were in, so our singer, he was Joseph. Ben, who you've met, who was on our pod, he was ended up becoming our singer, and he ended up becoming Joseph's stand-in. And that's how we kind of met Ben. And then our bass player, and my friend Phil, he played the Elvis Pharaoh. Was it Elvis Pharaoh in it? I can't remember. There was the Elvis character, wasn't there, in Joseph? But basically, our band's got all lead roles. My job, literally, I got to sit on stage in a cloak and be fed grapes by slaves. Hey, it was a different time. And I was not allowed to get my long haircut for the duration of the play either. So, of course, thankfully, no hair jokes today. No hair jokes. I mean, for theatre, I like acting theatre, right? For me, if that makes sense, you know, I like seeing a top actor on the top of his game, just absolutely smashing it live. For example, I missed it, and I'm really glad. Bryan Cranston did a theatre production of Network, the classic 70s film. Yeah. And you can just imagine how good that would be. I saw, against my will, Orlando Bloom in Killer Joe on stage, and he was the worst thing in it. Like, every other actor in it was a million times better than he ever was.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. The best actor in it. Do you remember the girl in the first Kingsman movie? The British agent girl was.
Yes.
I can't remember her name, but she was played by an actress called Sophie Cookson. She absolutely stole that play, man. She was so good in it. I walked in to sit down, and she's kind of, everyone's walking in, and she's just like walking around the set in character, and like, you know, putting the plate out for dinner and sitting on the roof of her trailer and all this kind of stuff. I was like, that's insane. And it went on for about 20 minutes to half an hour before the play actually started. I was like, wow, that's so cool, man. Like, that was so immersive. You're like, what's going on? It's just like a stagehand. Oh, no, wait. No, it's definitely the girl from Kingsman. What's going on? Yeah, I was going to say, getting back to the point, was the trailer for this film actually quite kind of dragged me in. Now, Jimmy Tatro. I can't even say the word Jimmy at the minute.
Jimmy Tatro is what I'll give you that one.
Jimmy Tatro, yeah. He's really good as a clueless son whose job it is to save the camp. Despite being somewhat of an idiot, what I like is Tatro never plays Troy as mean to the kids, and pretty quickly his character arc is all about learning to understand why the camp and the theatre means so much to them all. And I think this could easily be a less nuanced performance where Troy is like a real dick before getting it and having that kind of character turn as the film goes on. But here it's a lot subtler. He's not actually that bad of a guy at the start of the film. He just doesn't understand it. And as the film goes on, it's how he learns to appreciate what everyone's doing there. So I thought it was, I really liked that performance in it, to be fair.
I'm really glad to hear that about a character, because too many times movies try to play the outsider guy who's really cool too negatively, and that's not always the case, So,
what I was going to say is, you've got, like you say, you've got Claire from The Bear and Evan Hansen, and they play lifelong besties, Rebecca, Diane, and Amos. And despite their love and talent for the theatre, they've never quite made it to the big time themselves. And also, they are quite massively codependent on each other in quite a toxic way as the film develops. So, so far, so predictable, if I'm honest. But what makes this film, pun intended, sing, is the mock documentary format, which hasn't been used this well in ages. I mean, probably the best mock docs I can think of recently were you had Pop Star with Andy Samberg, Never Stop Happening.
Never Stop, Never Stopping.
Never Stop, Never Stopping. That was brilliant. That was like a modern day Spinal Tap for like the pop industry, I thought. Yeah. Massively underrated. And I suppose for TV, you got What We Do in the Shadows. That's kind of that. For that. But every time a title pops up on the screen, it made people laugh. Like every time a title come up, it was undercutting what you've just seen, or like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Whenever the episode title comes up, there'll be a scene in the bar, and then the episode title will be completely opposite of what they've just said. Or it'll just be something so wild that you're like, oh Christ, what's this going to be at? I always remember when it says Sweet D gets set on fire, and you're like, Jesus. Or like a recent series, there's I think in the most recent series, there's an episode called Frank Shoots Everyone of the Gang, and you're just waiting for it to happen. The aesthetic of the documentary format here works really well, because it kind of keeps you at arm's length a little bit from all the kids in the film. And I think you need that, because rather than, there are 3 or 4 kids who are kind of the main focus, but there's so many kids in the film who are really talented young performers. And just the 4 off the top of my head that were really good was Kendra Sanchez, Bailey Bonick, Donovan Colan, and Alexander Bello, and they're all superb. And honestly, I would not be surprised that they'll all have their own like Disney Plus show, if from years to come. Like these kids were so talented, and anyone needs someone for a musical, boom, these are your kids you're going to have. Also, a special shout out. Do you remember the film Minari, the South Korean drama that did well at the Oscars a few years back?
I did not watch it.
So there was a young American Korean kid in it called Alan Kim, and he's in this as well, playing an aspiring 12-year-old talent agent called Alan Park. And he steals every scene he's in.
Nice.
Like he's just in the council's offices using their phone, trying to like broker deals for the other kids all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's not in it a lot, but he's in it just enough that whenever you see him, he's going to do something really cool.
Nice.
I was also jazzed hands. That's a joke. Yeah, terrible joke. When I saw that Ayo Edeberry from The Bear was in this. However, her character was slightly undeveloped, if I'm honest, because she plays Janet, a clueless counsellor who seems to be absolutely bullshitting her way through the job. And there isn't really any arc or development to her character other than that one trait I can remember. But the show within the film is all about Troy's mum, Joan. Therefore, the play the camp put on is called Joan Still, because she's still in a coma. No, I mean, I don't think that's the joke they were going for, but that's what I thought.
Oh, man.
But the idea of the play is to celebrate and chart Joan's life, which means we get some great original songs in the film, like Women Can't Read, The Wall Street Noise, but best of all, the show closing, Camp Isn't Home, which I won't give anything more about, just because it's so cleverly done.
So are these quote-unquote original songs?
Yeah, they're all original songs that have been written by the writers.
The characters?
Well, the writers of the film, who two of them are in it. So yeah, like Ben Platt and Molly Gordon have written this along with the other writer and the director as well.
Okay, so these are songs that the kids, quote-unquote, made for the show within the movie.
Yeah, and I believe when this film had its premiere at the Sundance Film Festival, they had the bunch of the kids there, and they did a live melody on stage of the song at the end.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, the script for this is really razor sharp, and this kind of gives you, because it's about kids, right? So you think, well, it can't be that cutting. And there was a bit in one of the trailers when Platt's character, he says to a young girl, so he sang about a young girl to his colleague. He's like, look, I just don't buy her as a French prostitute. And then like everyone looks shocked. And it's not the comment, it's that he's used the wrong terminology, and he apologizes by way of saying, sorry, French sex worker. And apparently that's fine. But that's the kind of the edge of it, like the script. But
that's funny.
I have to ask, Jose, like camp is not a thing we ever have in the UK, or at least it wasn't when I was like a kid or this age. Did you ever go to a camp where you were in the States?
So it's kind of complicated because here in Florida, it's not quite the same even as what they show in the movies. Because what we see in the movies is farther up north, where there's
Okay.
larger lakes and forests, and here it's more of like beach. And if we
Yeah,
go
yeah.
inland, it's more swamp in Florida. We did have day camp where, like, sometimes you'd go and see this place. You take a bus and we'd go like an hour somewhere inward, and we'd see this place in the woods, and they teach us things like nature and like was it using a compass or
So it
archery.
sounds like the Scouts, which is
Bit
what
a
we have
bit
over
like
here.
that, yeah. So it was
Yeah.
like, but that was like 1 week's worth of camp during the school year that they would use to help us learn about nature and surviving
And
school.
you're like, and you were just like, guys, we're from Florida. Like, this is nothing.
Yeah,
We've got, like, literally going in our back garden. We have to worry about gators. You're in the
yeah,
woods here. Big deal.
yeah. So it was like the very limited version of going to camp, but I think it's more easily accessible up north where there's larger areas for woods,
Ah,
and
interesting.
being in the city, it's harder also to like get city kids to go see the woods. It's
Right.
like saying like you're in New York trying to take the kids to the beach and show them what it's like to be outside.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I don't know at all. Like, where would the nearest beach to New York be? Like, what, Jersey or something?
exactly,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, got
or
one.
the Hamptons,
Okay.
maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it's always something. Even I grew up being like, oh, that'd be cool to try to see what it'd be like as an adult, you know. But I feel like you had to have to go up closer to Georgia or Alabama to get something anywhere near this kind of campus, feel.
As I say, man, it was just something that we just didn't have in the UK, or like at least where
Yeah.
I was born and grew up in the UK, man.
Hmm.
So anyway, yeah, I would say this film absolutely flies by because best of all, it's only 93 minutes.
Oh wow, so it's probably a tight film.
We love exactly. There is no fat on this film at all, man. It's just tightly scripted, really well acted, some great original songs, and it's a great film. And I believe it's coming out on digital in the States any day now, as we record this on
Really?
September the 11th. Yeah,
Oh
so
wow.
it's definitely worth checking out. So I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10. I think
Well, that's a good review. That's a good
it's a
review.
very good film.
Random question: have you seen the show Smigadoon on
I've started
Apple
watching it.
TV?
Started watching it. I am about 3 or 4 episodes into season 1.
Okay, that's another show. I think it just random fact. I think is great for people who enjoy theater. So I just thought I'd check to see if you've seen it.
Yeah, no, you recommended it to me, and I have started it, and I forget why I. Do you know what? I think it's because I was trying to watch it late at night, and I didn't want to watch it with headphones in. Like, I wanted to watch it in the
Ah,
daylight. Doesn't actually have the like music and all that. Also,
yeah,
something I thought I want to appreciate this properly. Whereas there's certain shows you just put on when you're like, if I fall asleep in this, it doesn't really matter.
yeah. It's a definitely more subtle show, but it's. I think it's another good theater based thing to watch.
I'll definitely be going back to that, man. So next up, film that is going to be, I think it's going to be definitely a big hitter at the Oscars next year, and that is another film from A24, and it's a debut film from South Korean Canadian writer and director Celine Song, and it's called Past Lives. And it's a gentle romance about two childhood friends, Nora and Hae Sung, played by Greta Lee and T Yo, who after Nora and her parents immigrate to Canada, reconnect at various points throughout their lives with her life in the US and Canada, and Hae Sung's life in South Korea and China. Now, the film starts with unnamed observers speculating on the relationship between Hae Sung, Nora, and her husband Arthur in a bar before we flash back to their childhoods and then progress through the story chronologically over the course of 24 years. Now, I've heard this compared to Richard Linklater's Before Sunrise, which is one of my all-time favourites, and I can kind of see the comparison as this slow, beautiful film about two people who have a really deep connection. And just like Vienna in Before Sunrise, New York is quite the backdrop in this film, and almost a character in itself. And although both Korean, the differences between them both, because obviously Nora takes her English name when she immigrates, she becomes very Western in her outlook, while Hae Sung still seems traditionally very Korean. And yet it's that very Koreanness that kind of draws Nora to him, and because I think it reminds her of home, despite her having a happy life with her husband and a successful career. And as I said, this feels Linklater as well, in the way that this is purely about those small moments in time with these two people and checking back every few years, which is very Boyhood, which of course was a film that he did he filmed it over 12 years, going back and filming a little bit every year. Now, Song didn't do that, but this film does feel like a mashup of his stuff. You got the before sunrise bit with the people walking around the city having that deep personal conversation, and like you say, you've got Boyhood because it's those same people over different points in their lives, just obviously not actually done for real, which Linklater did. And it's a very understated film with naturalistic, internalized performances. When you think Oscar films, you think of big performances where someone's overcoming an adversity or a prejudice. This isn't that. This is just people dealing with regular life. And it's not even that far-fetched a story. It's quite a simple story, And it really feels like we are just peeking in on these people's lives as they occur. Now, what I didn't know is when I was doing my research for this, that the director-writer Celine Song, because Wikipedia doesn't tell me if she still is was a staff writer on season 1 of a show I'll be talking about in a little while, which was The Wheel of Time. And as I read up on Song, I realised how much of this film can be drawn from her own personal life experiences. Indeed, her background is pretty much the same as the characters. She grew up in South Korea. Her parents I think her dad was a director and a filmmaker himself, and they immigrated to Canada. Well, all that happens in the film happened to Song in real life. Nora's dream to become a playwright was clearly one shared by Song, because she went to New York and to Columbia University to get a degree in playwriting too. And the similarities don't stop there. Song is married to a fellow writer, Justin Krasitzkis, who was also written Luca Guadagnino's upcoming film with Zendaya, the tennis one, Challenges. So, you kind of got this couple who are both like writers on the rise together at the same time. I would say safe to say that this film feels really deeply personal to Song and seems like a heightened version of her own life. And it's that personal connection by Song to her characters that make this film so work deeply on an emotional level. Because likely most of this story, as I say, is just a heightened version of her real life. However, as fantastic as this film is, I think it's very much an art house crowd and critics film. Anyone going in expecting like an epic romance or something like The Notebook, they're going to be disappointed because it's not that film. It's a very internal film where the biggest emotions will be conveyed without dialogue, and something simple as like a tilt of the head or a stolen look is like devastating within the film. And so it's a very subtle and nuanced and underplayed. So, I think this film could be in running for the best original screenplay, and I think it's definitely going to get the acting and best film nods. However, just like when Linklater's films get nominated that deal with the minutiae of everyday life, they also tend to get ignored at the Oscars and other award ceremonies. So, as I say, unless it's like a character overcoming a massive obstacle, the quiet, more reflective films like Past Lives, well, they don't get a look in, but really, they absolutely should. So I'm giving this a 9 out of 10.
Wow. That's actually higher than I expected because of what you were saying. But no, I like that.
It's a mood piece, man. It's like, it's something you sit and luxuriate in. You don't need loads of dialogue. That's what I like. It's funny to say it's well written. Yeah. It's funny to say it's well written when there's not that much dialogue in certain scenes.
You know what it might be? It might be well directed then as well.
Writer-director is the same person, right? So,
well, a writing credit versus a directing credit, you could be a good writer and not a good director, and vice versa. If it's not necessarily all the writing, but just the moments and the head nods and what, like you said, then that I think comes not only just from the actors in it, but the director guiding the actors to portray those moments.
And I suppose it's how much the director knows what note of the performance they want to convey what they want in the script. How much of it is done in the performance? How much of it they're filming and go, that's exactly what I want, that's a take, that's what conveys it? Or is it something that is scripted? And they go, no, you nod at that point, you look that way at that point, you look back at that point, and that is all scripted from the get-go because they know exactly what they want to do on that side of things.
I think a lot of times it's a combination of both, but most of the time it usually is something scripted, especially when it's something so subtle like this that I think a screenwriter usually predicts ahead of time.
100%, man. So we're 2 for 2 on the pod today. It's 2 great films that both people should check out.
Nice.
And now jumping over to TV, and we're off in the streaming kingdom where we're going to have the red-headed stepchild, nay, the forgotten child of big budget fantasy. Yes, we're going to be talking The Wheel of Time Season 2. And it's nice that The Wheel of Time has reminded us it has a Season 2, because I think a lot of people have forgotten what with The Rings of Power and House of the Dragon coming out since the first series of this came out. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is based on a series of epic novels, or epic series of epic novels, by Robert Jordan, and were finished by David's favourite author, who you met, Jose, Brandon Sanderson.
Yes.
Now, I got to maybe the 5th or 6th book before I checked out. Like we were talking off air before we started recording, and I was saying the first 3 books were superb in their world building and are rightly regarded as some of the best of the genre. You know, George R.R. Martin himself said this is kind of what inspired him, and a guy called Tad Williams who did the Dragonstone Chair, I think he did a trilogy of books, which was really good. And these were the influences for George R.R. Martin and Game of Thrones. But, and this is my problem, is when you've got this great core of characters in the first 3 books and then they get split up and sent off on their own journeys, the issue for me that Jordan had after that was that once the key characters were split up, the newer characters and storylines were never as good as the original ones. And Jordan fell foul of the standard fantasy author trope of giving into too much description of this world he created. I really didn't need like 50 pages just on what people were wearing and eating at a feast. The main plot just seemed to get sidelined, almost like Jordan would rather write about what he found more interesting instead of continuing the story he originally set out to do. Now, fans have said that the books did improve once the end was in sight, and that Sanderson did a great job in finishing the series after Jordan passed without finishing them. And as we said, now, the first season of Wheel of Time was pre-Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and indeed, I found it is true that most of the crew work on both shows all year round, so they literally go from Rings of the Power over to Wheel of Time and back again. And a lot of people said in the industry was that the first series of Wheel of Time was almost like a tester for the crew who like did a good job on that. Right.
Oh, wow.
Be doing, what better way to blood your crew on an epic fantasy show for an epic fantasy show than put them on an epic fantasy show.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I remember it was a really kind of lukewarm reaction to the first series of this show when it came out. I think arguably the Rings of Power had a much better reception. I mean, visually it looked absolutely amazing. I really did enjoy it. The Wheels of Power. The Wheels of Power. Good God.
Wheels of Power.
The Wheels of Power. That's a new spin-off show coming soon to HBO Amazon.
It has Jeremy Clarkson as well.
Oh, good God. And it's been cancelled. It's been cancelled on the radio.
Oh, no.
Well, see, when they both announced that as well, because obviously Wheel of Time came first, and then I think they announced Lord of the Rings as well. And I was like, I question the wisdom of Amazon having both be in production at the same time, because I felt for sure that Wheel of Time was going to get left behind. And David, he really did struggle through season 1, and he really wasn't a fan of it by the end of it. And he is not watching this second series. And it's funny because I don't think he's read up to the point in the books where I checked out yet. And yet he's more beholden to the books than I was. I mean, their first 3 books are really good, but if you'd got to like book 6 or 7 and still plowed through, like how are you going to make it to book 14, man? See, I think because I wasn't as beholden to the books, I was happy with season 1. It's perfectly fine fantasy. It's just like the middle of the road. Nothing looks terrible. It all looks fine, but there's nothing original in it.
Neil, are you going to cause some drama with that comment right there?
I don't know. Perfectly fine fantasy? We'll find out. Sorry, I was going to say, have you actually seen The Wheel of Time, Jose?
I have not seen Wheel of Time. I hate to admit that. I didn't know it existed until season 2 adverts started coming out. I completely missed it.
So proof right there that season 1 just got buried once once Rings of Power came out. Oh, that epic fantasy show on Amazon. Yeah, so, well, basically, without giving you too many of the spoilers or the plot, season 2 starts with most of our main characters having been split up, following, have a guess, a big battle at the end of season 1. However, it's funny because they were supposed to be fighting the baddie, and the baddie is called the Dark One. Of course, it would seem a little bit early in a 14-book series for them to face the actual Dark One at the end of series 1. And as we find out, it's not actually the Dark One. It's one of his lieutenants called Ishmael of the Forsaken. And what's funny is they think they've actually defeated him in battle. And what they've done is they've actually released him. You've got your two female leads, Nina, Eve, and Egwene, and they're off to the White Tower to train to be Aes Sedai. You're just the look on your face. I'm explaining this like it's. Do you know what it is? It's like explaining Star Trek to someone who's never seen a sci-fi film. Not that I'm saying you haven't seen fantasy films, but it's such deep lore in this book and film series, TV series.
It reminds me of the fantasy version of Foundation. It's like on the surface, it's a sci-fi future film or series, and then when you start, I'm like trying to keep up with it all. That's all.
I think you're there, yeah. So you basically got your two female leads characters, Nina, Eve, and Egwene, and they're training to become, well, basically witches in the White Tower, which is like witch training central. With the Wheel of Time, it's kind of like the Force. there's like a power, and they could call it channeling when you can like summon a force. But years and years ago, the Dark One tainted the source, and that means any man who channels eventually goes crazy. So the power is only for women. So that's quite a nice little sort of twist to the original, the way the story's set up. But I will say, again, there's Bar Rosamund Pike, who plays Moran, who's like the star of the show, which is funny because she's not really the star of the books. There's like a massive young cast in it, and to be fair, no one's actively bad in it. You know, when you've got a big cast of unknowns, and there are quite a few decent characters in it. My favourite at the minute, watching, I mean, I couldn't remember much about season 1, but I've just watched, like I say, the first 3 episodes of season 2 so far, which they dropped all at once, which I think was on purpose, because I think the first 2 episodes just passed me by. And honestly, I struggled to remember or care what was going on in them. But episode 3 was the best one of the series so far. You've got one of the training witches, Aes Sedai they're called Leandrin, who's played by an actress called Kate Fleetwood, and she's brilliant. She just chews the scenery in it every time. She's supposed to be like a good, but she's such a villain in it, even though it's not even that she's outwardly a villain. She's just a bitch in everything she does. For me, I'm enjoying it a bit more than I was on the first couple of episodes. I've got episode 4 to crack through later today, probably. And I like how the pieces are slowly being put in place for the rest of the season. But it's, again, for me, it's just simply fine. And as David mentioned, actually, he reckons with Amazon's commitment to Lord of the Rings and the fact that this isn't a massive, massive hit for them, I really can't see this show coming back for a 3rd series. And I'm sure that Amazon's, their way out of it to escape all the shit from the fandom will be, oh, well, Hollywood strikes when it does get cancelled.
Yeah.
But I would say, look, this is perfectly fine fantasy if you're lost for something to watch, but definitely not essential, sadly, unless you're a massive fan of the books. And even then, I don't know if that's going to be a recommendation, because David was, and he's refusing to watch the 2nd series.
I feel like it's one of those things where if you know the source material, you like the actual translation less.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Well, see, and that's the last point on this for me, is that because there's great stuff in the books, but a lot of the fans what I've read up on the books, they say, look, you can make a really good show from it. You don't need to be so close to the material. You can take more liberties. You can adapt it more and pull the best stuff out of it and leave the rubbish stuff behind. And I don't know if they're doing that. Or, I mean, I don't think they're going to get the chance to do that because, 14 books, this is what, maybe 2 or 3 we're on? There's no way they're getting there. Not for the cost of this show. Unless it's like some tax cut thing where they employ all these people on Lord of the Rings as well, and this is to keep them busy in between that. You never know. Maybe. Dodgy accounting, this could be how they keep Lord of the Rings going, by making this as a tax write-off at the same time. Who knows? Jeff Bezos does. Yeah. Right. So, completely changing tack, there's a new show on Netflix that I discovered, Jose. And I say new, because Netflix didn't make it, they acquired it. From one of my favourite countries, Australia, who have been doing some really good shows.
Hooray, Australia! I
would go Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
Oi, oi, oi.
Yeah, there we go. Good. I mean, it was a bit too long of a delay there, Jose. I'm not sure if they let you back in, but yeah, that's fine. So next up, there's a show called Fisk. And no, this is not a spin-off show featuring Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, Kingpin's alter ego. Although I would totally watch that. Give it to us now, Marvel, you utter bastards. That is a show I want. Come on, if you can waste 6 episodes of Secret Invasion being utterly dog shit, you can give us 6 episodes of Vincent D'Onofrio being Wilson Fisk.
Dude, a New York crime boss. That would be amazing. You don't have to worry too much about what to do.
Just get some of the writers from The Sopranos. Boom, there you go.
There you go. Boom.
No, instead, Fisk is actually a small Aussie sitcom about a probate lawyer called Helen Tudor Fisk, who works for a funeral home in Melbourne after her home and work life kind of implode in Sydney. Fisk is played by comedian and writer Kitty Flanagan, and the show is written by her and her sister Penny. Now, I heard nothing about this show at all until it appeared on the Netflix homepage recently. And I was like, oh, what's this? Oh, I like Australian stuff. Obviously Deadlock. Two of my best shows of this year have been Deadlock and Colin from Accounts. So I was ready for another Aussie comedy. And while not on the same level as Colin for me, this is still a really good 6-episode first series of a half-an-hour comedy to get into. Fisk is your standard workplace sitcom in that everything pretty much takes place in or around the office. Helen's the outsider who comes into the small family-run firm of Gruber and Gruber. Well, Gruber and, because Ray and his sister Roz, we find out fairly on that his sister Roz has been currently struck off, which gives Helen the job opening she's got there, and that her father is a famous retired judge. You've got a brilliant young comedian called Aaron Chen who stars as George, who seems to be tech guy / secretary, and she just constantly refers to him as webmaster, which is brilliant, because I don't think she knows what that means either. The whole show works on this really good level of cringe, because Flanagan's really socially awkward performance means she doesn't just clash with her co-workers over like really insane stuff, like stumming in the fridge or central heating being too hot. It's all that kind of smaller workplace stuff. But also she starts arguing with her clients.
Oh, wow.
The boss, Ray, he just tries to he knows he needs someone else in because his sister can't do the job. And because of the connections of Fisk with her dad being a former judge, they hire her. I've really enjoyed the show. I binged the whole thing in maybe two sessions, because it's half an hour and there's only 6 episodes. But a second series has been aired in Australia. So come on, Netflix, give us more Fisk now, you sacks of shit. No, that was to go with the Secret Invasion thing. Sorry,
that was very aggressive, Neil. So that means you must really like the show.
Yeah, well, or really, really hate Secret Invasion. I think that's what the comment was me for. Jose, have you seen any other Australian shows? For example, the first episode of Deadlock yet?
Unfortunately, I have not. It's a little trickier to watch Deadlock and Fisk, but to be honest, it is on my list of things to watch. And I guess I'm expecting to binge both shows. So I think once I watch them, you'll definitely know, because we'll definitely won't be able to stop talking about them.
We'll circle back, Jose. We'll circle back. And then we can both absolutely rip David a new one, because he watched one episode of Deadlock and then gave up on it.
Yes. Well, I'll be like, what's the word? David, you sack of shit. Why aren't you watching the rest?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Wow. Guest from the pod, Dan Crinian, the editor of Extraordinary and Killing Eve, actually commented underneath when I posted this that he thought this was one of the best shows he'd seen in years. So if that's not a reason to watch it, there you go. Recommendation from an Emmy-nominated editor.
There we go. No reason not to watch now.
Well, we are now coming up to our spoiler section. Sound the spoiler alarm, then.
Spoiler alert! There's spoilers everywhere!
Well, from Down Under to the Final Frontier, it's time to talk Trek. Now, I have binged both seasons of Star Trek Strange New Worlds recently, and I love it. It's so, so good. Jose, I believe you have now seen the first episode.
Yes, I love it. It's been a long time since I've been instantly hooked on an episode of Star Trek.
So what was the last Star Trek you watched then? Can you think off the top of your head?
Oh, I know immediately what it was. Picard. Picard was the last one. I watched the first 2 episodes, and as much as I liked it, it just didn't pull me in. I couldn't just binge it as easily. It was the first season.
See, with Picard, I feel that you should have stayed with it for season 1. Absolutely ignored season 2 because it was absolutely terrible, because I didn't watch it either. And then season 3 is just like the Next Generation season 8.
Oh, can you elaborate for those who don't understand that?
Okay, sure. So Star Trek: The Next Generation was a 7-series run of a Patrick Stewart show that ran from the late 80s into the mid 90s.
I think so. Yes.
This was back when you had 22 episodes a season. So there was a lot of Star Trek: The Next Generation out there. And bar having the odd 2-parter episode, which obviously famously Best of Both Worlds, that was the name of the episode I was trying to think of. What Star Trek: Next Generation did, though, just like the original series, it used to be episode a week. This week, the crew will investigate this pleasure planet. Oh, there's a space anomaly. There's a nebulous gas cloud. Oh, something's gone wrong in engineering. Better throw in an episode on a holodeck. It was a similar kind of episodes that there wasn't a lot of overarching arcs to the story. And it was only with, generally, the Next Generation started doing that slightly, but there'd be a 2-parter in the middle of the series and then, a cliffhanger at the end of the series. And that's kind of how they always did it. When Deep Space Nine came out, that, again, started kind of similarly. And then when Ron D. Moore kind of really fully took over it, for those who don't know, Ron D. Moore is also the creator and showrunner of the Battlestar Galactica series. And DS9 was kind of his first run at running a sci-fi show. And what DS9 did for the fans, it really got them on board because it started telling an ongoing storyline week to week. And it brought in religion, it brought in war. It took Trek to a next level, as it were, for me. And again, 7 seasons, 22 episodes a season, an absolutely stunning show. But I feel that you have to have a bit more knowledge of Trek to just jump in at DS9. And then after that, you had Voyager, which was...
I was a big fan of Voyager.
Really?
After Star Trek The Next Generation, I kind of missed out on Deep Space Nine. And then I got back into Voyager. I think I saw the first episode and then I missed a couple episodes. But once I got into further the first season, I was hooked. I really enjoyed the idea that they were stranded. And I was a big fan. It was just something different in the Star Trek from what I had seen previously. But I had missed Deep Space Nine.
Well, it was Quantum Leap at Star Trek, wasn't it? I think at the time. Because Quantum Leap was one of the biggest shows at the time as well.
That is you're correct. That is a really good observation, and it was just something. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and then I think it was funny to kind of see that back into another show later on.
But did you see it to the end, or did you check out?
I watched it almost to the end. I think the last season I missed, so I don't remember seeing how they got home.
I was about to say, you don't know if they got home, Jose. They might not.
Oh, we know they got home. We know they got home.
No, I'm the same. I think I checked out around season 5, I think, maybe. I don't know what it was. I just, at one point, I think, life gets in the way, or it just wasn't as good anymore. And I was like,
I don't think it was necessarily the quality of the show that led me astray. It was just that fact that, it was probably something where my personal life was, the timing wise, I didn't get to watch the show because everything was on cable. So if you missed it on TV, you missed it forever at that point. You never... Unless you bought the DVD series,
I did have quite a few DVDs of DS9 and Voyager. No, VHS, man. They used to release the VHS tapes, but there would only be 2 episodes on one tape.
Yeah, so it was one of those things where I'd watch the show, but I just couldn't keep up with it because of personal life stuff. So I wasn't able to keep up with the last season. But I was a fan. I really enjoyed the ship. I liked how they had modified the small craft, the landing craft, to become like a racer. I thought that was really awesome.
The Defiant.
So I'd watched a little bit of also the Star Trek Enterprise with Scott Bakula.
There you go. There's your Quantum Leap link.
It was a little too retro for me. So, and I think
it got cancelled early, didn't it? It was on the first Star Trek shows. It only made it to like what 4 seasons.
Yeah, but it kind of heightened the idea that going back and retrofitting technology to make it look more modern, yet not too modern because of the original Star Trek from Kirk. And which I think, again, is a Strange New Worlds thing where they're technically before Captain James T. Kirk is a captain, but the technology's been polished up enough to where that was something I noticed. Like, oh, okay, they have things here that haven't really been explained in other ones around this time frame.
Well, so, I mean, yeah, because I'm not 100%, because I didn't actually watch any of Enterprise. So where does that take place in the timelines?
It was pre-Kirk, for sure, but by at least maybe 100 years. Okay. It was one of the first warp core ships, because they didn't have shields, and they had, it was weird. It was very limited.
So Enterprise is pre-Strange New World, then?
Correct.
We're there. We're almost there, Jose. We're almost there. So then, working our way through Trek lore, because I think Enterprise didn't do so well, there wasn't really a lot of shows coming out. There was no Star Trek shows on TV then for quite a while. And then you had what they call the Kelvin Universe movies relaunched with Chris Pine coming in.
Yeah.
And, they were perfectly fine films. I mean, everyone enjoyed
a fan of the first one a lot. I think the first one did a great job. And then
the
second and third
Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, is Captain Kirk's father.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really think they dropped the ball on not using him sooner for, maybe the third one.
That was one of the rumors, wasn't it? They was going to do a time travel one and have Pine and Hemsworth be together in the film. But I'm sure that script's been written, but it just never made it off the ground. Yeah,
well, I think the whole cast has at some point to kind of confirm that they're not making any more with that era. And it's really disappointing.
Yeah, because it just didn't go anywhere, man. Well, I mean, it was good and it was fun and all that. And any film that uses Beastie Boys sabotage immediately gets an extra star from me. But what this then brings us to, which was Star Trek Discovery.
Yes, that was a show that I tried to get into, but I was really bogged down by the Klingon storyline. They really pushed that so hard in the first season, and that's where they lost me. I could only watch so many episodes. Yeah.
I got to the stage where this is a chore to watch. It's not fun. And the darkness and the blood and the violence and all that, it's just too dark for Star Trek, man. Because again, everyone, I know in modern day, everything's got to be dark and more gritty and all that kind of stuff. But DCU, the old DCU says hello.
There we go.
For me, Roddenberry's whole thing was it was about exploring, it was about being hopeful, it was about trying to be peaceful with all these things.
Yeah.
And Discovery was like the polar opposite of that. And again, when they did, I think they did like 2 seasons in, they do a time jump. And I was like, I can't.
Yeah, honestly,
time jump just means you've given up on the storyline you're trying to do, and you've hit the reset button there. That's your big way out of it.
I'll be honest, that's what caught my attention with Discovery was I noticed they changed it up, and so it's like, oh, I want to see why they did it. Apparently, I know why now, but and it wasn't even that it was too dark, but I was just bored with the Klingon storyline. I'm like, I expected it to last maybe 1 or 2 episodes, and then something was going to happen. And it's like I watched like 4 episodes, and I was still like waiting for something to happen. It was just too long of a setup for a show that you should have things clean up by the end of at least 2 episodes.
Yeah, or just have, like when you get to Picard season 3, for example, there is one ongoing storyline, but you know what it is? It's kind of right. Picard's got to get the whole gang back together again, and each episode we're going to add an extra person to the crew. So it's like a recruitment thing, and then before the big battle and where that story goes. So after bagging on Discovery, basically, we had Star Trek Lower Decks come out.
Yes.
Again, a lot of people were really sniffy about that one. It was like, oh, but Star Trek's serious. You can't make fun. Someone who worked on Rick and Morty, someone who worked on Solar Opposites. No, that's not going to work. We're going to get to Lower Decks in a second. Yes. Strange New Worlds come out, and Strange New Worlds actually only came out because of Discovery, because there was an episode of Discovery where there's a whole time thing, and we meet the crew of the Enterprise with Anson Mount, Captain Pike, and Rebecca Remains, number 1, and Ethan Peck's Spock. I don't think the rest of the cast in Strange New Worlds were on there at that time. It was just those 3 main characters, if I remember rightly. Everyone really enjoyed those episodes, and they thought, these guys are good. And from that, we got Strange New Worlds. And I loved the idea of it. It was like you say, it's the whole retro thing. And you can almost argue that Enterprise was almost like a dry run, or what Strange New Worlds is doing really well, it's not making the same mistakes Enterprise did. And I
think that's a better way of saying it.
And like you say, I think you've only watched the first episode so far, and again, it's hopeful, isn't it? It's Pike goes to this planet. How many times in Star Trek lore or sci-fi have you seen the thing where technology's been left behind, people who shouldn't have it yet are on the verge of destroying each other?
Yeah.
And that, we as Star Trek, we as Star Trek and the Federation in this show, they're like the omnipresent presence going, well, look, we could leave them to blow themselves up, or we could say, no, put your toys down.
So it was interesting for me because normally I've already watched stuff leading up to the new show, but this is one of the few times where I just watched the new show without the previous episodes from Discovery, and I could see cues in each scene when they introduce certain characters. They're like, oh, hey, good to be back. Good to see you again. And I'm like, I missed that part from the previous shows. So it's really interesting. It's not saying that it's taking away from it, but I know that if I were to have watched the other episodes, I would have been like, hey, cool, he's back.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that, only because I think this show does such a good job of setting it out as its own thing. The only thread you really need to know is that Pike has that vision of his own death.
Yes. And I definitely wanted to know more about that. And I don't
think there's much more of that shown in Discovery, really, is there?
Here's the thing is, I don't know. I didn't know. So, like, I'm wondering, like, oh, do I have to watch Discovery now? And I think that's what they did on purpose. It was like, oh, you want to know more? You got to watch another show.
I don't think that's the point at all. I think they've just gone, let's redo it ourselves. We'll tell it how we want to tell it. And that will be his kind of... And obviously, like, say, Anson Mount as Captain Pike with the great hair. His arc is going to be really good as the series goes on, because at the back of his mind all the time, he knows when he's going to die, when and how he's going to die. So that's weighing on him so much. And obviously, as the series goes on, that's seasons 1 and 2, it does get addressed, and he's able to kind of not have it dominate every episode, which is good. I thought that was a really good way of doing it, because otherwise it's going to be too dark and serious, and that's not what this is. This is a show that is so retro that we are on the Enterprise before Kirk is on there. This is Pike's Enterprise, man.
Before the right Kirk is there, because I like in the first show they teased a Kirk, and then it was not the one you expected.
Sam Kirk.
Sam, okay, I completely.
Sam's his brother. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was really cool. But also they have Uhura on there, played by Celia Rose Gooding.
Yeah,
and I thought that was really fun. And apparently she's like a rookie. at that start of
Yeah,
the show.
yeah. At the start of the show, she's like Ensign Uhura. And
Yeah.
what I like is with her character, with the kind of her storyline, kind of season 1 is, and again, not to spoil it for you, as more of the show goes on, you learn she's spectacularly intelligent and that she could pretty much do any job she wanted. And so she kind of rotates throughout all the different areas of the ship as the season goes on.
So one of the things I liked in the first episode, especially with Uhura, is when the alien gets on board and gets loose and she's stuck in the elevator with him, she starts talking about one of the sports, and then he kind of calms down, and then it almost seems more genuine than her trying to distract him, which I thought was really interesting. And it was just a small character moment, but I'm like, okay, I see that she has some charisma on the show, and that's great.
I think the whole cast are massively charismatic in this, and I don't think there's a weak link amongst any of the crew.
Oh yeah, Ethan Peck as Spock was great, and I hear he only gets better because apparently they have to play it up to where he's still more Vulcan than human in his characteristic, because he has to go through the whole arc with the other Kirk. And then I'll be honest, I was surprised by Rebecca Romaine as number 1. I didn't expect that at all, but I hadn't seen the other show.
One of the things that put people off Strange New Worlds when it first came out was it's not an overarching arc to a story. It's not like Picard. It's not like Discovery. It's
episode of the week,
just hanging out on the Enterprise. But what the showrunners do really well is they change genre within.
Oh yes, you did
the
say
show.
that.
Yeah. So there's an episode later on where a young girl's storybook, they pass through a gas nebula, and there's a sentient being in it who makes the book come alive. So suddenly the whole ship is a fantasy novel.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so again, what they get to do is change characteristics around. So, this character,
Nice.
You can imagine what they do with someone like Spock. His character gets a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a shout out as well. 2 of my favourite characters in the show, and that's the medical team on the Enterprise, Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel. Because again, they're just so good.
Yeah, I was gonna actually mention that Nurse Chapel. She seems very interesting, but I'm hoping obviously I don't think this is gonna happen because of your rave review. But in the Voyager, there was a blonde character in the sickbay who was working with the
Neelix
hologram.
Yeah, Jennifer Lien Kess was her character.
Yes, and so she was an interesting attempt at a character, and then they kind of eventually got rid of her. And so I was hoping Christine Chapel or Nurse Chapel was going to work out, because it's like
she does.
Yeah, she has a quirkiness to her, but sometimes quirky characters don't always last too long.
Also, as we like her say, she's Australian.
Oh, of course, of course. We always love the Australians.
What I like as well is that with Dr. Mbenga, he's so quiet and softly spoken. What you find out in the later season is they've worked together before. And so you get a flashback episode with them in a war zone.
Oh,
when they're like, and it's the closest as I think I've ever seen to Saving Private Ryan with Star Trek.
Wow,
like, they're like beaming injured survivors down to like this transport bay, and like, right, quick, get them off, boom, beam in the next person, boom. And it's just, wow, like the PTSD thing in it. Again, you got like one episode in the series, it's a courtroom drama.
Wow.
They have to introduce an alien species that is horrifying and terrifying. You have that in this series, which I don't think they've introduced in episode 1 yet. Have you heard mention of the Gorn yet?
Not at all. Not at all. Although, yeah, at the end of the episode 1, they did have like watch this for the rest of the season, and they show clips from different episodes. But I haven't seen the overarching villain for this show.
But I mean, the episode where you first meet the Gorn, it plays like The Thing or Alien.
Ooh, nice.
And that's what I mean. Each episode, although it's sci-fi, courtroom drama, fantasy, war film, flat out horror,
I do have another question, actually. It looks like there was another character with a past, and I don't know if she was from the other show, but Christina Chong, her character, La
Noonien Singh. Yes, descendant of Khan.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I didn't know that at all. Khan! Yeah. So is that what it is? Is she's a descendant of Khan?
Yep, and of course that will be addressed in the show.
Wow, but am I supposed to know that? Am I supposed to know that going in? Okay,
no. Okay. Again, it's one of those things because again, it's not referenced in any other show because she wasn't in any other shows. She was, I think, she was only in this. But if you've obviously Wrath of Khan, one of the greatest films of all time. If you like, wait a minute, Khan Noonien Singh. Wait, Lian Noonien Singh. They must be related somehow.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
how that relationship is hinted at and develops, and her part of it, she is brilliant as well in this show. She's a British actress, which I didn't know.
Wow. She hides her accent well.
She does kind of a bit of a British accent, to be fair, I think, in it.
Okay. I just know that near the end of the first episode, she talked about her family and she was the last survivor. So I didn't know what that was all about. So I didn't know if that was in Discovery or not. So I was just very, if anything, this show just makes me very curious for all of its characters. I mean, especially the more so the new ones that I don't know. Because Christopher Pike and Spock, obviously I'm expecting great things from them. But even like the pilot, Eric Ortega, but she just seems like a fun character. And I know they're going to do stuff with her because everyone seems to have more personality than a lot of some of these shows that I've seen in the past, you know?
And I think that's what makes it work, man. That's definitely what makes it work, because you're watching it and you're like, I'm really enjoying spending time with these characters. And there's no weak link in that cast. There's not like, you know, you go, oh, it's this character's episode. Oh, I can't be asked. And what I would say is, as season 2 kicks in, then the quality level just goes up. If you enjoy season 1, which I did, season 2 is just, obviously, you know, there is a musical episode in season 2.
I'm actually looking forward to that because musical episodes and shows that are not musicals are always just so much fun.
I will say I was absolutely thrilled when they reference the Buffy episode in it. Minus, well, this is a minor spoiler for you. Everyone else, you've seen it. But when they're trying to figure out why everyone is just suddenly singing on the Enterprise, they go, what could it be? And someone goes, could it be bunnies? And I was like, yes.
That's great. I love that. It's like subtle enough to where if you don't know, it's fine, but if you know, it's wonderful.
And I will say, when you get to see the K-pop rapping Klingons,
oh my god, that's okay.
But it's such a clever idea. What I like about the episodes as well is the times of them are all over the place. Some of them are they're generally around an actual full hour as well. Some of them are over that, some like hour and 5. Some of them are like 55, 54, but they're as long as they need to be, and that's what I like about the show. It's just,
that's great.
And of course, the other big thing we have to talk about in season 2, which cleverly brings us to the next show we're going to talk about here, is they do a Lower Decks crossover. So you get live action Boimler and Mariner, played by Tawny Newsome and Jack Quaid, and again, the show starts so cleverly. It's such a clever way of doing it. I was like, how are the two tones of this going to work? Because it's very cartoony and sitcom-y, isn't it? The Lower Decks.
You know what is Lower Decks? Obviously a cartoon, very much comedic, but I think when it comes down to it, the characters are so well written that when you do a crossover with itself, in terms of like, you know, Strange New Worlds, from what I'm hearing with Strange New Worlds, it's so flexible that you can have characters that are comedic to some degree, but you can still have their core being they're people who care about each other in that world.
Well, what like I say is the show starts in animation. It starts as a Lower Decks episode.
No way. Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It starts as Lower Decks, and then they obviously meet. I won't go into the specifics, but obviously
they become in real
stuff
life.
Happens, and then, Boimler and Mariner become real life. And what's clever is the way they talk, the way they act, the whole kind of comic book side of it, the different tone that the two shows have, that is carried across to the live action. So they're of acting a little bit more like they would. Obviously, and I think it's in this episode, there is the shout out, because I didn't know this. Rebecca Romijn is married to...
What's his name? Stamos, John Stamos.
No, well, since then she's been happily married to Jerry O'Connell.
You're right. Jerry O'Connell, who voices Commander Jack Ransom. I completely forgot about that. And you know the weird thing is I actually cannot hear Jerry O'Connell in that character, which I actually enjoy more, because sometimes with certain voiceover actors, like let's say Sam Rutherford is played by Eugene Cordero, you hear Eugene Cordero, but with Jerry O'Connell, he just blends right in. It's really great.
I can't wait until you're fully caught up, and then listeners, we are going to do a Star Trek Strange New Worlds spoiler special. We're going to go through the best revelations and twists and episodes of both seasons of the show. And we're going to be joined by Sci-Fi Fanatic himself and our spoiler alert guy. Yeah, Ben Lord will be back.
Ben Lord.
And he's not losing that nickname. He's never losing that nickname.
Never.
But that brings us to the last show we're going to talk about in today's episode in our spoiler section. And it's the first 2 episodes of, and thankfully they dropped in the UK the same day as the States now, Or was it the day after? It's the day after, but, time difference.
Same time-ish.
Same time-ish. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4.
Yay! So I have to say, though, this is where I was really tempted to watch more Strange New Worlds, because right off the bat, in the first, I think, couple of minutes, the characters talk about, that one thing we did with Captain Pike we can't talk about. And I'm like, damn it, I need to watch the show. But I have a feeling that that was probably going to be the only reference they have.
Well, because like I say, only the first 2 episodes of that are out at the minute. I'm not sure what night it is on, but yeah, it's only the first 2 episodes out at the minute. So, but hey, what a joy! I mean, so yeah, staying in the Trek world, Lower Decks, and this time, as I say, we joined Boimler and Mariner and the rest of the USS Cerritos crew. Now, episode 1 of season 4 is called Tuvix, and this is a love letter to all things Voyager, as our Lower Decks crew have to escort Voyager to its new home in the museum. Of course, things can't go smoothly forever, but also 4 seasons in, it's also unrealistic to expect all our characters to still remain as a lower deck cadets. So what this episode sets up is they're going to get promotions, as long as everything goes okay, which we know it's not.
And I honestly think this is the one thing about this show, Lower Decks, which is done that I've never really been able to catch on to mostly, is a lot of behind, like, background nods to shows that I haven't seen, or to just stuff that I don't know because I don't keep up with all of it. But this episode, because I was a Voyager fan, I really enjoyed, because of all the comments that they were like, remember this happened? And I'm like, I do remember this. So it was so exciting to finally be part of the inner loop of inside jokes for the people who watched shows before this.
The thing with this show, right, when it first started, everyone was kind of a bit sniffy. Star Trek, it shouldn't really be comedy, as this is just going to be like. Bearing in mind that the creator of this show, Mike Mahan, when Mike created this show, he spent time as a writer on Rick and Morty, and all that was what kind of, you can see the Rick and Mortiness of it, though. Like,
a little bit, yeah.
I mean, come on, Portal Gun. The first episode, when the 2 characters get fused, together, and then they get hold of the device that, like, just starts making them combine everyone together. I was like, this is just like a Portal Gun episode of craziness from Rick and Morty.
Yes.
Also, he did Solar Opposites, the other animated comedy, which was funny because the main voice in that was Justin Rowland, who then got fired for being a douchebag, and they've replaced his character on Solar Opposites with Dan Stevens, who is now English in the show, and they literally, like, don't bring it up.
I think something happened to his voice. They fixed it, and they're like, I guess I'm going to talk this way now. And that's how they addressed it, which I thought is hilarious.
Well, the only better way they could have done it is, the guy who voiced me was a douchebag, and this is Dan Stevens. Hey, Dan Stevens. And then that would be a way to break the fourth wall and do it. You can really see the craziness of that. But the thing is, Mike has clearly got a love of all things Trek. And like you've just been saying, you can really enjoy the show just as it is in a purely episode basis, but you're going to get so much more out of the show when you see all the nods and calls back. The last series of the show, we had the episode where they went to Deep Space Nine. And again, the in-joke there, they took the piss out of the opening title sequence of DS9, which just spent ages, was just going around the pylons of the station. That was the whole intro sequence. And it's like, wait, what are you doing? We're just going to watch you go around a little bit longer, just a little bit more. And like Quark on it, and like Ferengi and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, yeah, man. And that's what's the great thing about having it animated. They can literally do whatever they want from the Trek history. They can pull out any element, whatever they want from it.
Yes, and they make fun of the character types too, because in episode 2, they do the Klingon Lower Decks, and then the what's the
you got the Vulcan Lower Decks. She's a new character who's just joined, hasn't she? Tendy's friend.
And then the other ones with the cloaking devices. What are they?
Romulans. The
Romulans. They had the Romulan Lower Deck characters all scheming against each other. It was really funny because I knew just enough to kind of make sense of why they were doing that.
What I also liked in the I can't remember now if it's episode 1 or 2 because they both blended and I'm watching both back to back, is Rutherford doesn't get promoted when the rest of them do just because he doesn't want to, and then like Mariner's like, and Tendi, I think it's Mariner's like, well, no, it's Tendi, sorry. So, well, what about all those times you saved the ship and you did that? He goes, oh yeah, can I get a promotion? Yeah, sure, there you go. That's like, but then he had his rival Livik, And he said it, and the way the shot zoomed in, it was exactly like Newman and Jerry from Seinfeld, man.
Yes. Rutherford. That was pretty
like,
funny.
Yeah, I was like, great. He's got a rival because he's so optimistic and like never like that's what. Again, it just works so well. So I was like, great, that's going to be good. But yes, Jose, the time has come for episode 2 and the creation, and I'm not overselling this, for perhaps one of the most devastatingly horrific evil characters of all time in Trek lore.
Ooh.
And that
we
is
all know who it is.
The bone-drinking Goliath known as Moopsie.
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 Yes, episode 2 has the crew investigate a galactic menagerie. So think the Collector from basically Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers films, where he has a whole... Do you know what the funny thing is? I Googled this because I remembered there was an episode of the original series called The Menagerie. And I was like, okay, it's got to be similar. No, the story had nothing at all to do with a menagerie where someone was collecting people. So, full sabotage, I read the whole thing. But it was one of the original series' first 2-parters. So, but absolutely nothing to do with people being collected and put in display cases. And yes, in this episode, 2 humans are part of the exhibit who had accidentally been caught by the owner, Narj. And I just love the fact that immediately, like, oh, Narj is going to be dodgy, right? It's going to be Narj. If you've seen one keeper of exotic species in a cage film or show, you've seen them all. This guy's going to be the baddie. And no, he's like, oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, I don't know how we picked them up. All you Homo sapiens look the same to me. First of all, there's just a cute little creature called Moopsie.
Yes.
That's just funny thing. Like, he looks like a little Pokemon, doesn't he? Like,
he does, yes.
Even down to animation style, it looks like a Pokemon plushie. And it just makes it up because he's definitely not going to turn out to be a bone-drinking killing machine. No, sir.
No, not at all. This is too cute. And also, at the same time, you expect Mariner to be the one that also let her out.
Yeah. Well, that's the twist, isn't it? Because the whole subplot is Mariner overhears Ransom talking to someone, and she thinks he's going to, like, bust her down and, like, depromote her again. So she's like, she just is going to be totally insubordinate as much as she can.
Yeah.
And Ransom's just like, no, okay. She's like dealing with it, and then she realizes that, oh no, wait, he was talking about something else, and it wasn't actually her. And but Moopsie, man, yeah, Moopsie is let out by the humans who decide that they're gonna take over the menagerie themselves, and Moopsie is a bone-drinking killing machine. Yes. Honestly, Paramount, if you are not producing all the Moopsie merch right now, you're literally throwing away all the money. I mean,
yeah.
All I really want now, Jose, is how do they bring the cuteness and horror of a live-action Moopsie to the screen? There has to be a Lower Decks crossover with Strange New Worlds again at some point, because most of the episode takes place in Strange New Worlds on the Enterprise in Strange New Worlds. Bring the characters from Strange New Worlds into animated form and put them. I mean, how much fun could you have with Number One and Ransom, right?
I think that would be. Oh yeah, yes.
Because isn't it in this episode? Correct. I think it might be in the Strange New Worlds episode in the animated sections where, like, he's got Boimler's got a poster of Number One on his wall, and like Gramps walks past and he's like, hottest damn Number One there ever was, like something like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'd love the potential right there, honestly, to see another episode, especially if it's in the cartoon section.
Yeah, I think it's definitely got to be done, man. But what's good as well, I like from the first episode is they are setting up, and you mentioned a bit where the ship's being destroyed in the start, and the Romulans and that. There's a mysterious ship that is causing chaos in each episode, in the pre-credit scene or the post-credit scene, and they are setting up what looks like a overall villain for the season.
Yes.
Having said that, this is Lower Decks, right? So it's definitely going to be someone like Badgie coming back, isn't it? Already someone was like, I want a Badgie, and I want a Moopsie team-up.
Oh, man. Yeah. But it's funny because, like, this is probably going to be like a smarter version of what they did with the last all encompassing villain, because it was just like was it the Klingons giving these stupid alien race these weapons and having them pretend to be the ones that are in charge?
There's so many ways they could go with this, man. So many ways.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
For me, it is. I think Star Trek Lower Decks is the best. I think because you're a Trek fan, you love it anyway. But like you said, what it's done is it's made you want to seek out other Trek to get more of the references because you enjoy the show so much. So I mean,
for the record, I'm looking at the schedule. The next episode is coming out September 14th. So depending on when you're listening
Thursday
to this,
or Friday.
it's a Thursday release. So yeah, if you guys are interested in watching this show and you haven't been completely spoiled what we've talked about, this is definitely worth the watch, I think.
Having said that, this was a spoiler section.
Oh, I keep forgetting that.
The only thing with Star Trek now is Discovery. Is Discovery done? It's done, right? It's finished. It's gone. Or is
I
it
really
just...
don't know. It says
I don't
5
even know.
seasons from what I saw, but I don't know if that's continuing.
And do you know what, Jose? I don't care enough to even ask you to look it up. But what I will say, we definitely know we're going to get Star Trek Strange New World Season 3. We're definitely going to get Season 5 of Lower Decks, because that was already confirmed on the day that Season 4 came out. So the only thing we need now, Jose, is Star Trek Legacy. And you may be thinking, well, what's Star Trek Legacy?
What is that?
So that is a spin-off show that we're hoping gets launched from the end of Picard. So, okay, we're going to do a bit on Picard now, without any major spoilers for Season 3. As I said, Jose, skip Season 1. Do you know what you can do? Read the Wikipedia descriptions of what happens in Season 1 and 2, and then watch Season 3 of Picard. That's the way to do it. But what Season 3 of Picard does really well is it's a swan song for all the Next Generation characters, but also it introduces some really good new characters. And by the end of the show, there's definitely a way they could set up a new ship going forward with a new crew on it, and mostly made up of these new characters that are introduced in Season 3 and some from the early seasons of Picard. I'm like, I want to see that show. Everyone was like, we want to see that show. Because what Season 3 of Picard does, it's set at the furthest point forward in all of the Star Trek timeline.
But no, I'm excited to see what happens after Picard, because that means there's no limitation on what is able to do.
Yeah, they're in the future, man. And from what you've said about how much you've if you loved Voyager, man, and you just, because there was too much Trek, Picard Season 3 is definitely worth hunting down.
Okay.
Just skip. 1 is worth watching, to be fair. I really did like 1.
Mm-hmm.
But all you really need to know going in Season 3 is Picard doesn't seem as old and frail anymore. Why is that? Oh, because of what happened in Season 1.
Oh, okay. So Season 2 is just a wash.
A wash. Season 2, and I hate using the W word, but so I'm not going to. Wash, yeah, that's the word, wash. Season 2 is a wash. Season 2, they tried bringing the Borg Queen back and doing all Borg Queen stuff, and that was okay. But then they literally go to Earth in the modern day, and you're like, they're doing stuff about ICE agents rounding up illegal immigrants, and one of the characters gets caught up. And I was like, no, Star Trek, bad Star Trek. Star Trek should always be using sci-fi as an analogy for things like that in the world, not actually just being lazy and going straight for, oh, look, these people are bad. Yeah, we know they're bad. Do it in a much more clever way, because that's what you've always done.
Yeah. Science fiction has always been a great use for analogies. A
lot of it, people reckon, came out of the 50s with the McCarthyism and all that, and that filmmakers couldn't say what they wanted to say about society in a regular film. Therefore, they had to hide it in a horror film or in a sci-fi film. And no, that's on that alien planet these people are doing these bad things. It's definitely not supposed to be what's going on in the real world. And that's kind of how they've always done it.
I think if they're too on the nose, like you said with Season 2, then it just becomes a little like, okay, we get it. Let's just move on.
Yeah, people don't like being preached at.
Exactly. That's what I was going for.
Preach, well, except don't in this case. Yeah. Right, I think that about rounds us up. So, Jose, coming up soon, as soon as you've caught up, we are going to be diving into our Strange New World spoiler special. Strange New World. I think I said those words right. We're going to be diving.
Strange New World.
We're going to be diving into our Strange New World spoiler special with Ben Lord, and later this week we are going to be recording with Ben Lord once again. We're going to be doing a deep dive into all things The Bear. So join us in.
Yes. Actually, it'd be a fun one is if you guys could send us a name of one of your favorite recipes for things you like to cook.
Is this just because you want cooking tips, Jose?
I would love cooking tips. I'm a horrible chef.
I am good with I have got a teppanyaki grill that I do mostly all breakfasts on, or steak. I do a mean steak now with occasion rub. I've got occasion rub. I like prep it all, the whole thing. Yes.
I know how to scramble eggs.
With the teppanyaki grill, it's like having a hot plate like a diner. So you literally just chuck everything on at once, and then it's all done.
Nice.
So yeah,
that's awesome.
And this is you've been listening to We Needed Cooking Tips, and we'll see you again next time.
Cheers.
We Needed Roads.